Hi, I'm Nicole
and Rebecca
from conquerbooks.com.
and today we are talking science fiction tropes.
I think science fiction is just a little bit harder to come up with tropes than fantasy, because the only really solid trope in science fiction is technology.
And it's changed so much. Science fiction that came out in the early 1900s was working on an entirely different basis than here. Fantasy that harkens back to the Middle Ages, you've been able to do that for much longer.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. As technology continues to evolve, so does science fiction, whereas magic really doesn't evolve, so you're still sitting on the same thing in fantasy. Interesting. So, my first list of the things that I really like in science fiction, my number one that I've got is parallel worlds. Sometimes you can really start to mix science fiction and fantasy with this one, which I really enjoy. But I just like the idea of having a doorway, somewhere you can go through and find a world that is very similar to your own, just with very significant differences. My second one is body modification, and it actually goes along with my third one, which is mutants. They're very similar. I just like the changes with people. I think it can have a really drastic effect on a character and what a character is going through, and the way they live their life. So body modification, I think of things like robotic arms, super eyeballs, anything along the lines of being a cyborg. Whereas a mutant is usually more organic changes, physical changes. Sometimes telepathy could be used in a science fiction novel for mutants. Anything X-Men, really. That's what I think of.
That makes sense too, because when writing about aliens, it can be hard to, imagine a completely new plane, new language. Would we as humans even be able to see or recognize them and as beings and what they're doing? Whereas mutants and body modifications, it's still a base character that we can understand as human readers, but with entirely different new elements that really get your mind thinking and, thinking about what you would be like in that situation too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, cyborg Nicole. That's coming next video.
Or mutant Nicole.
So some of my favorite science fiction tropes include anything AI. I think artificial intelligence is really fun to think about. I think that I like it a little bit less when it's just evil AI, ha ha ha, I'm going to get the humans. But when it's complex and is learning how to be a being, how many times do you get to witness, the creation of, a new being? And so I think there's a lot of questions to ask as an author and as a reader, some really interesting kind of thought experiments to bring yourself through. We recently read Wanderers by Chuck Wendig, and that had a really great complex representation of AI in that. I'm also really into time travel. I think that here too you have to be careful because you can't overuse it or you can't make it too convenient for people just to travel back in time. But I think that there too, theoretically, time travel could be possible. Not necessarily in the ways where we often see in books where you time travel spontaneously, like in The Time Traveler's Wife or in Outlander with the magical stones that bring you back and forth through time. But it's still something that there's enough science to it that you want to think about it. And definitely literature, whenever time travel is involved, it just explodes because there's so many different interesting things you can do to characters, so many ways to confuse characters, and so many ways that people try to fix things in the plot line that then they end up screwing something else that happened previously. So it's very good for complex plots.
Yeah, those books always mess with your head.
Yeah.
You're always not expecting the changes. Even though they're inevitably going to make changes, you're always like, what?
Yeah, I think given the chance, I don't think I would travel in time. Would you?
That's tough.
Yeah.
Forward, I think. Probably not backward.
Yeah. There could be some financial advantages to traveling forward.
We also know everything that happened in the past. I'm more curious about what's to come, what we don't know about.
Yeah, another one that I really like reading is After an Apocalypse. I think that we've seen a lot of cities and civilizations fall in literature recently. But I think that when I both read books, but then also watching movies and television shows that have these themes, I always wonder, like, well, but what do they do next? Like, is somebody farming now? Like, how are they getting food to eat now that, you know, the food chain has fallen apart and, like, government's been destabilized? Like, I don't like too many practicalities in books because you don't want to lose that magic. But I also do really like seeing, like, well, how would you build this again? And what sorts of problems and interesting scenarios does that then present to your characters?
It's easier to destroy than it is to build.
Yeah. All right, so what's some of your least favorites?
My number one least favorite is the evil human race. When books ultimately wind up with people being the cause of everything terrible that's happened, I think that it is kind of degrading, to be honest with you, to just say humans are bad, we are immoral, we are liars, we are polluters. Just, we're flawed. Mm-hmm. That's it. And I don't like when everything heavy is placed on us being evil, because we're not.
Yeah, and it doesn't really allow for complexity there, because humans are also, in real life and in books, you know, the basis for a lot of good things too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. My second one is the stereotypical alien. I feel like it's really easy to say aliens are the savior race or they're gonna kill us all. Mm-hmm. And realistically, if there are aliens, they're probably a lot more like us than they are either of those. Mm-hmm. They're complex people with their own problems, probably don't want to get involved in our problems.
Probably not. Or even they might be, you know, microbes, bacteria, like animals. Like, yeah, there's so many different things you can do with that. Like, why just like, oh, they're evil and they're not. Yeah.
My third one is the Dystopian Government. It was good for a while. It was fun for a while to read these books that have evil institutions in place. But I think that it's overdone. And realistically, again, the government is just a unit of people who are trying to do their jobs. I feel like it's really easy to think of the government as one big entity who's got an ulterior motive. And it's easy to build that in a book, I guess. It's a pretty shallow character, though. When you look at it as a government, there's really no nuance there.
Yeah, faceless.
Yeah, and it goes the same with the corporation too, the evil corporation, which, like, in our day and time, it's very easy to resort to that because a lot of us fear the things that are going on in corporations. But in literature, I think it's overdone, and I think that we should start to move past that idea.
Yeah, I think it's also exciting, you know, seeing things fall, but then a lot of times in those books, you're also looking at it and saying, like, well, why don't these people band together and save themselves? Or, you know, there's a level of reasoning and logic, though it may be low. You can expect some level of reasoning and logic among the general public. And I feel like in those cases, you have like a mass of people that are just like going haywire, and then like 3 good people who are like, look, it's all crumbling, we can do nothing about it. And yeah, it's just not there. So I kind of agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so some of my least favorite science fiction tropes. Conquest. Everything about Conquest in relation to aliens. That this idea of they just want to come here and take our planet, and we don't even really know why, but they're just going to come and take it from us. And I think that is one of the things that really terrifies us. And so I think it's very emotional reading things like that, but it also doesn't really lend to a lot of interesting storytelling. And the idea that aliens would come all the way over here to take a planet, like, you can make some things to build that story up and give some reasons why they would want it, but it just doesn't seem realistic, and, you know, it just doesn't have any future as a story. You know, it is going to end in a battle. One side is going to win or lose, and that's that. Another one that doesn't really get me going is sudden appearance, when aliens are like suddenly on the horizon and like, oh, we had no idea aliens existed, or, oh, you know, like nobody saw this coming, but here they are at the boundaries of our planet ready to, you know, take us over or communicate or whatever. I think that there could be a gradual acceptance of aliens and gradual contact. Three Body Problem does a really interesting way of reversing that, where it's kind of a slow burn. You are learning about aliens and slowly increasing communication, trying to figure out what's going on even when they're far away. And so something like that allows for much more exploration than just suddenly the aliens are here and we have to try and rush to deal with it. Also, things that are painless or don't take up any resources, related to light speed travel, related to like beaming people around, anything that, you know, is kind of cool but doesn't have any consequences or seem to use any resources, I think kind of falls flat, because it's just kind of this figment in the book. It doesn't really feel solid or heavy. I think that if we do achieve light speed travel, or if you want to achieve light speed travel in your book, you have to have a way to make that happen. And when I read science fiction, I don't go crazy over very detailed scientific explanations of things. The reason why I come to a book is for the storytelling and the excitement and, you know, the way that it makes me feel. But I do like there to be some representation of thought behind some of these big technological gains. Otherwise, it just kind of falls flat. And, you know, beaming people around, well, is convenient for a storyteller to just be able to make things happen. Also, for a reader, is like, well, they just wanted that to happen, so they beamed them there.
Yeah, I think that's why The Martian was so popular, is Andy Weir got real scientists to help him devise how this guy would plan to live on Mars. And the story was not just him clicking a button, you know, beam me up, Earth, or just simply planting seeds. It was really involved and helped you understand in a not overbearing kind of way. Mm-hmm. Good science fiction.
Yeah. So I think in general, science fiction tropes are maybe a little bit harder to identify than fantasy tropes, because science fiction is changing so regularly. But when they're done, they really have to be done well and in a new way, because your readership is also becoming more educated. We're, you know, learning and investing more in the sciences. And I think that people have high expectations when they come to a book. They want to, you know, be able to imagine what a future could look like, right? That's what science fiction is about, imagining what our future could be.
It's interesting that the good tropes, the ones that we like, are things that can be further built upon and explored. And the ones that we dislike are the things that are just very simplified.
End all be all scenarios. Yeah, that's true. Good. So be sure to let us know what tropes in science fiction you really like to see in the books that you read and which ones you're kind of done with. And subscribe.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.